In Hollywood, they call it the big reveal. The big reveal. You might remember in the TV show Extreme Home Makeover, it would happen when everyone would say, "Move that bus," and the bus would finally pull aside, and the family would see their new home revealed to them for the very first time. In movies, it's that moment when the audience gets some vital information that they weren't aware of before, that the director intentionally withheld towards the end to build some suspense. Now, don't worry, I'm not about to tell you about the big reveal at the end of the new James Bond film or something like that, right? But how about an example from an older film? You know, one of the most famous big reveals in the history of Hollywood happened in the Star Wars franchise, right, in the movie called The Empire Strikes Back. And it was that moment when the evil Darth Vader tells our hero Luke Skywalker, you know what he said, right? Say it with me. "Luke, I am your father." And the audience just gasped with shock and surprise. The big reveal, the big reveal. Well, in a sense, we could say that the Epiphany is the big reveal of the Christmas story. You know, for centuries, the people of God have been longing for the Messiah to come. Both the prophet Isaiah in our first reading and the psalmist today look forward to that day when the glory of God will shine on the Israelites so brightly that even foreign nations are going to be drawn to God. And the exiles of Israel finally find a home. And foreign kings will come and bring precious gifts to honor the anointed King of Israel. And all of those centuries-old longings are finally fulfilled in Bethlehem, when God's glory is acknowledged by the three wise men from the east with their gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. That's really what any epiphany is, quote-unquote, an epiphany. It's a big reveal. It's an aha moment in a sense. And with this epiphany today, we do get the big reveal of the Christmas story. God's majesty and God's identity is fully revealed and made manifest in this little baby. And his ancient promise to send a Messiah and a Savior is finally fulfilled. Now here's the difference, though. With Hollywood, the big reveal is often just one in a long line of reveals. There'll be another one at the end of the series next year in the series finale. There'll be another one in the inevitable sequel to the film, too. But God's big reveal is different. The Epiphany is the definitive reveal. God's only Son has become flesh in our world, and no other reveals can compare or surpass that. But you know, it's also far from the end of the story, because at the same time, the Epiphany marks a new beginning for us. The Psalm tells us, for example, that this vulnerable little baby will grow up to rule with God's justice, and that his rule, his kingdom, is going to be marked by compassion and tenderness, not by the domination and the force that we see in the rule of King Herod and so many others, for instance. So with God, his big reveal, the lights don't come up in the theater, the credits don't start to roll. Instead, the story goes on. It goes on, because the story unfolds in our lives too, day after day after day. In other words, if God's anointed Messiah, Jesus, reveals his glory by bringing peace and justice, and by caring for the weak and the vulnerable, and by showing compassion to those in need, well, then his followers, that's all of us, right, have to do the same thing. The Magi paid their respects by offering their precious gifts to the infant Christ. Well, we too have a precious gift to offer, don't we? Ourselves, our hearts, our very lives. The frankincense represents the worship that we bring to Jesus, to the Son of God. Of course, here in church at Mass, but also by enthroning him as best we can in our hearts and at the center of our daily lives. The myrrh can represent the crosses that we're called to accept if we want to follow Christ. The sacrifices that we have to make by denying ourselves and by following his way of humility and love instead of the selfish and prideful way of the world. And the gold we bring to acknowledge his kingship over us. Well, that's our commitment, that's our determination to work for Christ's kingdom by practicing peace and forgiveness and love in all of our relationships and by working for the culture of life in our world too. May other folks find in us wise men and women who are willing to be guided in all things, by their faith in Jesus Christ, through whom God has revealed everything that we'll ever need to know.